Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming in and listening to the show tonight. I'm Stuart. We got Larry on board for an update on a lot of stuff going on, particularly the war and the rumors of war. And what the Bible has to say about war is that it is coming, and it's going to start probably around Israel and expand from there, most likely. However, we do have the North Korean situation. How you doing, Larry?
Oh, hi, Stuart. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem at all. In fact, I'm glad you're here. You've been kind of monitoring this North Korean situation. What is the latest? Now, I've heard that he's most likely, Kim, is most likely going to go ahead and do what he said he would do. What's your take? What have you heard?
Well, I've heard basically the same thing. China's saying that they don't believe they can tone him down. And at the same time, you know, they've got 150,000 plus troops moving towards the North Korean border. And we have, of course, we've upped our ante in drones and fighter craft and armor, you know, in South Korea, and also moved some of that towards the north. We've got the fleet, which my latest understanding has been joined by a number of Japanese naval ships. And there are plans now, according to the latest I've heard, Japan has plans for some evacuations and possibly evacuating if Seoul, Korea, winds up being under artillery bombardment. They say that Japan may send boats and ships to evacuate some of the South Koreans away from the shores. So, you know, I don't know. Like I say, China talks like they're not positive they can stop him at all. And, of course, Donald Trump has said that, you know, if he has to, he will, and we'll do it alone. But this is very interesting going into this holiday. Of course, on our end, it's kind of like Passover and Easter, and of course, on the North Korean end, it's celebrating a so-called semi-god grandfather that they say descended from the clouds. So, you know, here we go.
Well, as I understand it, it is already starting tonight. Excuse me. That the Day of the Sun, or whatever he calls it, actually will be through our nighttime. Is that correct? Pretty much.
That's kind of the rhetoric we're hearing. Of course, what you're hearing out of North Korea, you don't know whether it's actually all true, and so we're watching that. What's interesting, though, is I did hear a report that this Kim, which is Kim Jong-un, as they call him, has notified a lot of press, a lot of media people to, you know, be ready about, you know, going into Saturday, which actually their Saturday starts at, I guess, dark tonight in our time. So we just have to see where it goes. The latest satellite reports indicate they pulled away and evacuated some people from the site of what they say is going to be their nuclear test. We don't know if that's true. We don't know if that'll happen, but apparently the preparations are done. So one thing that Japan's very concerned about, and South Korea both, is the fact that they're expecting some missile launches too. So you just don't know.
Well, to get into the background here, China has for years said that America was a formidable and their primary enemy. And a lot of the Chinese military have said that war with the United States is inevitable, and we had a naval admiral, I can't remember his name, it was some years ago now, who said that watch China, that China was definitely preparing for war with the United States. I wish I could remember his name. He died, but he was well-known and well-respected admiral for the Navy. I wish I could remember his name, but he gave a lot of warnings about China. Okay, so China and her military have basically sworn an oath, you could say, that they will attack the United States, that war with us is going to happen one way or another. And this has been going on now for a number of years. So all of a sudden, this guy from China comes over and hobnobs with Donald Trump. And I guess the deal was made, try to take care of, like you were saying, try to take care of Kim and the North Korean situation, see if you can defuse it. However, if you can't, we'll have to go in and take care of it by ourselves. And they have turned back a couple, I think, of coal barges and stuff like that, the North Koreans sell a lot of their coal, I guess, across there to China. And China has done a few things, but here's my conspiratorial mind at work. Is it possible that China is setting up a double cross, baiting us, getting us involved? Why would they mass 150,000 troops along the border, probably more than 150,000 by now? Why would they do that? That's my first question. And if, by chance, Kim does this, and we provoke him, and he takes out Seoul, which he could do very easily. How far south is Seoul from the DMZ line? That's pretty close, isn't it? Like 10 miles or 20 miles away?
Yeah, it's very close, way too close actually. And they say that Kim's artillery that's already aimed at Seoul could pretty much take out Seoul completely in a couple of hours of a barrage, and it would be nothing to him. He's got the armament, he's got the material to do it, and but all along, Stuart, in all the scenarios, in the war scenarios, they've said that Kim, if North Korea ever went to war again with the South, that they would conquer and destroy Seoul, which is the South Korean capital, within hours, and actually within a couple of days already conquer that nation and be down at the tip of it before we could ever get anybody else over there from America. So that may be part of the reason we've got that fleet moving up into that region.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's just say that he does this, and he starts the war. He'll obviously claim that we're the ones who stirred it up, and we're the ones who were doing the war rhetoric, and we're the ones at fault for this. However, if he takes out Seoul, he's destroying several million people plus about 36,000 of our own troops in that process. We're going to fight back. China is on the border. I can't for a moment think that China would allow the United States to take possession of any part of that area. I mean, North and South Korea, they would have an almost open line to launch a major offensive, and they could own the entire Korean peninsula in very short order. In other words, what they're doing is they're setting up us to cause the trouble And from the results and the ruin of a major war, they come in and then they take over the entire Korean peninsula. Is that a possibility, do you think?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the interesting things that he was in an interview the other day, Trump was, and they asked him, they mentioned North Korea and the threat there, and he said that we may have to handle it if China can't. And they asked him, well, what about the carrier fleet that's coming up towards North Korea? And it was very interesting in his reply. I found it intriguing, actually, because he actually mentioned that the fleet basically was nothing compared to the submarines that he had there that were sitting offshore, and he said they were a lot more powerful than that fleet. Now, you and I both know what that means. Now, was that a nuclear threat? You and I are both aware of what a nuclear submarine could do to locations in North Korea if it chose to, or if the orders came. One of the interesting things that I found listening to some of the generals talk today, they were very intrigued and frustrated with the years of Bill Clinton, and then following that, the years of G.W. Bush, and then following that, the 8 years of Barack Obama, where China and North Korea never got any pushback. Now, suddenly after, let's see, what is that, 8 and 8 and 8, that's a lot of years, Stuart. After all that time, will anybody take Trump seriously, period? If they do not, we could be in some real trouble, because I did hear today, too, the fact that Trump apparently has given his generals around the world an order that they don't, if they come under attack, they don't have to call Washington to get the ability to fire back. He told them just go to war.
Take care of yourselves.
Fight.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, that's unprecedented, Stuart. That's absolutely unprecedented.
That's following Putin's pattern, because that's what Putin has done to his field commanders. If you get in trouble, you're on your own. If communications are broken, just fight it out. And so what we have then, if this is a possibility, do we know who all the field commanders are and their attitudes towards the enemy? In other words, you remember the movie Red October? And there was another one, I can't think of the name of it. Gene Hackman played in it. He was the commander, and they were going to go to war, and then the communications got broken. And the commander wanted to launch the missiles.
Yeah.
What was the name of that?
Oh, some kind of something red or something like that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Denzel Washington played the one that was just underneath Gene Hackman and that. But it did kind of show what can happen when the communications get broken down. Hackman, as the commander, wanted to go ahead and launch. And Denzel Washington said, no, we have no verification. And at the end of that show, the naval board that had judged that said that they were both right and both wrong. So it is a quandary as to how you handle something like that. And you may be right. Maybe if he has given this, that would probably then apply to the aircraft carriers, and it would definitely apply to the submarines that are kind of hiding there. And we have heard rumors that there is a North Korean sub out in the Pacific, not very far off our coast. And have you heard anything about that? I mean, that's kind of a rumor. How do you verify it? How do you vet it?
Yeah, that's very interesting.
What's the latest?
Yeah, ironically, and I'll use that term again, ironically, that first was noted by Sartre Paul, of all places. And, after that, though, I've received a number of reports from different groups on the West Coast that they have noticed a lot of planes that detect subs flying that West Coast up and down and back out to sea and out in the Pacific. They are searching for something. There's no doubt about it. And, maybe that's true, maybe that's not true, but something is going on. And you'd asked me about an example. How would we know that a general had been given that authority? I think we got a really classic view of that on this Moab bomb, because I listened very closely to that data. And matter of fact, they're supposed to show us more of that later. Trump's going to actually put some of that in the public domain. And they said that the general in charge there in Afghanistan said he wanted that bomb to use there. And the White House said, if you need it, use it. And so he actually took it on his own authority. They said that general in Afghanistan, the U.S. general there, used his authority and dropped that bomb. And so I think, and it's very interesting, Stuart, that it seems to mimic a little bit the Russian scenarios of commanders in the field. If they do not have contact anymore with, like, the Kremlin, they can even loose nukes.
So this can escalate very, very rapidly. The thing that bothers me now, you said that they have found some encrypted messages going out from North Korea to their people, to their military.
Yeah. They've reported, and this is one of the things that concerns them. South Korea was monitoring North Korea. And actually, True News Radio was the one that put it on the website today. It says North Korean broadcast, radio broadcast, says mysterious numbers used, sent to believed to be spies in South Korea as encrypted messages were disseminated. So what they're saying basically is radio transmissions out of North Korea are giving directives to the North Korean spies that are embedded in South Korea, which I've read a number of articles that said that they had a lot of them. Actually, reminds me a little bit of the Japanese spies that were embedded in Pearl Harbor just before Pearl Harbor got hit. So this is part of it. If North Korea really is sending encrypted messages to their spies through numbers in their radio broadcast, then something is up. Now, maybe it only leads into this weekend, or we're watching very, very close this weekend to see where this goes.
Well, what's kind of interesting, too, about all this is that the Hopis, one of their prophecies was that some nations out of the East would cause all the machines in the United States to come to a stop. That's an EMP. That's the only thing that could do that.
Sounds like it.
Now, they had an alternative to that, but that was one of the things they said might happen. In other words, it was kind of open, but it could happen. Now, we have that satellite that comes, of course, over from the south to the north over America 2 or 3 times every day. And there are those people who claim that that's probably an EMP satellite, that he can push a button and boom, 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 down we go. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. Then you said you had gone back and looked at some of the Bible codes that had been run on North Korea. Can you bring us up to date or refresh our memories on those? Because I think this feeds right into it.
Yeah, I went back on, I was looking today and watching the news real close, and as a matter of fact, what's interesting, let me read you these headlines. This is Drudge headlines for today, Friday, April the 14th. Here's the headlines. U.S. showdown with North Korea. Pentagon could move first. North Korea will go to war if the U.S. provokes. Nuke test coming. Japan ready with evacuation plans. Electric grid concerns. So I went back and I looked at the nuclear and North Korea, Kim, and nuclear Torah codes that Barry Rothman had done, and it very clearly seems to indicate that Kim, as the leader of North Korea, initiates something that causes a nuclear exchange of some kind and in some way. And then, now what all that is, we don't know, but it was interesting that it seems the Torah codes verified that, or that did bear out in the codes in the matrix. But what's interesting, too, as you mentioned earlier when we were talking by phone, we were, talking about Ed Dames and his report, indicating, I guess via remote viewing, that North Korea would be the first to initiate a nuclear blast in anger. So, they kind of come together there.
There were some either prophecies or there's been some rumbles on the Internet. Of course, you get a lot of rumbles on the Internet, so you have to be very, very careful. But they mentioned April 15th as being a very possible bad day. Well, that's tomorrow. So I guess everybody should have a heads up as to what could possibly happen, because it seems to me the war rhetoric and the tweets coming out of Trump would indicate it's almost like they're trying to bait this guy who's obviously insane. You were telling me, and I think I read it somewhere, that if he gets mad at a whole bunch of military, he just lines them up and shoots them with an anti-aircraft gun. And I do remember reading that. I mean, that would just rip them to pieces.
Yeah, he's extremely cold-blooded, and really between the Clinton and the Bush and the Obama years, they pretty much gave him everything he wanted. He's got to where he is by bluffing. Of course, when you get a gambler that bluffs like that, he don't take losing easily. So, and that's what China was saying. China was saying they did not think they would be able to rein him in. They didn't believe it would be possible, that they were trying, but they didn't know. So that's what's odd, yeah. And you talked about April the 15th. Bill Koenig sent out a report today warning about this time frame that we're in. And, of course, the 15th starts tonight overseas.
Yes.
Early.
So what does Koenig, he just is warning us that something could happen, I take it.
Yeah.
Wow. So China, remember the Dmitry Duduman prophecy? And in that, if I remember right, you're more familiar with it than I am, I think. Didn't China and Russia secretly have a plan to take us out? But I don't remember what the bait was to get us. There is a Bible prophecy about America Babylon, and surely the least of them will draw us out. And I'm wondering if this guy Kim is the least of them that draws us out into a situation which we cannot handle ultimately. Because China could bait the United States, and this is the conspiratorial mindset again, could bait the United States into getting involved in North Korea, and at the same time they go into Taiwan, which they have said is theirs anyway. They've got those islands out there in the China Seas, so we couldn't handle that. There's nothing we could do about it, right?
Well, that's very true. I believe you're referring to Dmitry Duduman.
Yes.
Vision. I believe he had a dream. I remember I believe he said he saw the leader of Russia and the leader of China, and I want to say Cuba, and another couple of them, but he didn't remember who they were after the dream or whatever he had, and he said they were conspiring to attack the United States, to draw the United States into a trap. And, I remember that. Now, one of the other things, too, that has come up recently, and even Tom Clancy has wrote a lot of times in his different books that he's written, the very, very valuable oil reserves under that the South China Sea, and that North Korea and others, of course, but China most of all, wants all of that oil rights. Now, if China could get something started and then take North Korea, and they've already got their islands armored and, weaponized, they could take the South China Sea all to themselves.
Has North Korea or South Korea got any minerals or energy reserves that China might like to get a hold of, other than territory? Do you know?
I think it's just
I haven't looked it up.
They have minerals, and coal, of course, but I think that the oil reserves under that South China Sea is what really is drawing them,
Mhm. Well, I remember when we got into a battle over there in Korea, and I knew some of the fighter pilots that went over there, and China was throwing all their troops and everything into that battle. And some of the soldiers that came back that I knew told you how bad it was, that it just wave after wave after wave of troops that China sent into this thing in the Korean War. What makes people think they won't do that again? That's my problem with it. I just feel that there's something more going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. I can't imagine China wanting South Korea to take over the North. It would behoove them to move and take all of Korea if we get into a fighting war.
Well, it actually would, Stuart. Yeah, it actually would. And one of the scenarios we've been watching the last couple or 3 months, you got to remember too, that at the moment, remember they impeached the leader of South Korea, thrown her out of office.
Yes.
And they had an election which is very volatile. They've been having lots of instability with their political process in South Korea. So right now, the South Korean government is really unstable. It's absolutely unstable and basically leaderless. So really for China, this would be a perfect time if it was possible to literally take the whole peninsula.
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering, because why would you have all these troops on the border? And we have kind of vetted that, because that has come from all different sources, that China has a whole bunch of troops along that border. Well, why would they do that unless they were figuring on an invasion? I mean, you don't send the logistics alone of 100,000 or 200,000 or 400,000 Chinese soldiers is massive. So I don't know. I mean, this is just something that people are going to have to watch, but it could unfold very, very rapidly, right? I mean, on these Bible codes, does it say anything about the speed of this war that Kim, actually, he launches it, but I think we are provoking it. Do you remember it all from those codes?
No, I didn't see the codes indicating any time frame. However, I believe Ed Dames, when he said he remote viewed that, he said it didn't last long. And one of the things that now Tom Clancy, who had insiders into the government and intelligence, and that's why he had such great books. I noted in some of his books that it would be a nightmare scenario if the South ever took North Korea and China would wind up with American nukes on their border, and they just simply couldn't live with that. So that may be part of the scenario they're thinking of too, and it's a very dangerous. The whole thing is very dangerous, and if we get pinned down dealing with North Korea, what is going to happen? I told you earlier that they just had found a Russian torpedo that had washed up on the shore of Lithuania there, and that's where NATO is facing off with Russia, and Putin is moving troops. So, you know, you could have, and then we've got the whole Middle East at the very same time.
Yeah, what is switching over to Netanyahu and the Middle East? Are they still on high alert? If they are, again, that's awful expensive. They got to be expecting some major shift going on, and Trump, as usual, isn't really saying anything.
No, at the moment.
So are we to?
Trump has,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say Trump's really focused on North Korea at the moment. It appears that the U.S. has deployed their nuke sniffer plane to Japan, which puts it in the region where if there is a nuke capability there or one set off, you know, they'll have the plane for that. But another thing that's really interesting, too, I know you was going to the Middle East, but I found a report today in Yahoo News, which was very intriguing because it says Russia is arming their troops with newer weapons in the Crimea and also the Arctic forces. Now, that's also unprecedented.
Well, of course, biblically speaking, America is attacked from over the poles or the Arctic. And if you get out a globe and look, the only nation is to the north of America, other than Canada, of course, is Soviet Union, former Soviet Union territory, Russia. And it's a direct launch. They could launch their missiles, come right over the North Pole, and they can attack any area they want. And I don't know. It seems like we are shaping up into the Armageddon Script, which leads immediately into World War III. So speaking about Israel, the children of Israel, well, before I get to that, I want to go back to North Korea. They've been digging tunnels all over the place, right? I know China has. Have they dug south under the city of Seoul? I
don't know how far south they've penetrated underground, but they say that they're incredible tunnel diggers, and that most of North Korea's arms and stuff are stored underground, and you can go a long distance underground in North Korea, probably down into the south a little ways too. And Ed Dames seemed to have indicated they actually set off a nuke underground in a tunnel that goes beyond the demilitarized zone somewhere into South Korea, and he said they set it off to kill a lot of armor and South Korean and U.S. troops that had come up to the DMZ to face the Korean threat. So, you know, who knows?
So he hauls several nukes, or one or two or four, we don't know how many he's got. He hides them on underground tunnels, and then without any warning at all, boom. That seems to be the scenario of Dr. Doom. And they've been correct so far in what they have said. So people really should take note that this Kim character is the first one that uses a nuke in anger. And that was specifically said that he did it in anger. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate and willful, according to the remote viewers. Right? Is that what you read too?
Oh yeah, that was what I read. And what's interesting too is this timing, Stuart, because only today did I hear the data on Fox News reporting that Trump had given the generals the ability to, without calls back to the U.S. and the White House, they could defend themselves anywhere in the world with any weapons they had. That makes me think that maybe we're on a hair-trigger situation around the world right now, and Trump decided to give the generals the ability to defend themselves under any scenario.
Yeah. Well, things are really getting, how do I say, rather tense. What was the deal with Russia turning back that United Airlines, I think it was, and wouldn't let them in Soviet airspace or Russian airspace, I guess.
Yeah, my understanding was that was part to do with the NATO forces down on the Russian border there with Lithuania and the Baltics, and that was a sign that he was going to begin to turn around commercial aircraft in that region. Putin's not too happy with the war games that are going on the border there with Russia. And this is part of the scenario, or that's my understanding it is. But also, we reported, I think, the last show that Russian naval forces have come out now in the North Atlantic. So that's also very unusual.
That reminds me of the hunt for Red October. And the entire Russian fleet suddenly showed up in the Atlantic. But the beginning of that was that the commanders, Sean Connery played as the commander of that sub. And I'll never forget what he said. We're just going to sit off the coast of America, listen to their music, and when we're ready, boom. And you remember the guy that had that vision? He was up on the Empire State Building, and he was looking through those binoculars. You know, you put a quarter in and you can see everything.
Yeah.
And he was out there looking at the Statue of Liberty. What was that guy's name?
Was it A.C. Valdez?
I'm not sure. But he found himself over the Gulf of Mexico looking at America. And he saw the Statue of Liberty in the Gulf. And a cup came down out of heaven and said, "Drink of this cup." And the statue said, "No, I won't." And so the statue was forced to drink the cup. And she fell down on her knees and struggled to get back up. And she got back up and kind of swayed back and forth, and then finally just fell over. And he said he saw. So that's freedom. That's freedom gone. So that's martial law is what that is, I think, about. The Constitution is gone. All freedom is gone. And we're under a martial law military situation. And then he said he saw a skeleton rise up over Canada, and it blew smoke. He said down the East Coast, down the West Coast, and then down the middle of the country. And then he saw people screaming and running and falling over dead in the major cities and everywhere. In other words, it was a gas attack. And then the grand finale was these missiles came up out of the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Gulf, and over the North Pole. And that's how the vision basically ended, with the exception that after all of this happened, he heard singing, and he couldn't figure out why they were singing. And of course, the Bible says that the people of heaven sing at the demise of America, Babylon. And I just don't think the American people have any clue at all as to how corrupt and how criminal our nation has become. And you and I have talked about that before. The corruption, it's systemic. It goes everywhere. It goes all the way down into your tiny townships now.
Yeah. That's
so
very
that
true.
would more or less indicate. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that's very true. It kind of reminded me of that skeleton representing death. So a gas or a biological attack, it sounds like it'll come out of Canada somewhere into the U.S. and we'll be hit. You remember Red Elk talking about all the dead bodies that they couldn't even find anywhere to bury them all, and had to send them by the trains and trucks out to the Dakotas to bury them in arroyos out there. Yeah, train load after train load, car load after car load of bodies, dead bodies. So I don't know if that's a gas attack or whether they unleash a virus or what that is.
But, folks, America, whether you like it or not, America is Babylon. And I wish people would not mock that, but get into their Bibles and look at Isaiah chapter 47, Jeremiah 50, 51, and Revelation 17 and 18. That's all about the United States. And we are taken. And the prophecies that are leveled against her are already well entrenched and 100% accuracy, even the border situation. The Lord himself says, I'm going to fill you with aliens who are going to come into the country, and they are going to rise up and destroy you from within, and then we get nailed from without. And I'm not exactly sure, and I'd like your opinion on this, Larry. Why does the Lord take such vengeance upon the United States? I mean, most people would say, we have helped people with foreign aid, and we've done this, we've done that, and yet the Lord looks upon us as something hideous, even worse than North Korea in a way. And I've often wondered, what is it? Is it hypocrisy? Is it because we did have the Lord on our side and we just turned against him with a vengeance? What do you think?
Well, I always have wondered, we were given a task really to take the gospel around the world, and we were just given light that the rest of the world couldn't comprehend. For years, all the great evangelists and movements came out of America, and for us to really become darkness after all of that light, it must really irritate the Lord.
Yeah, like I think you and I have said, we'd hit delete long ago, probably, if it was up to us. I think maybe you're right, that, it says that we're mad upon our idols, we're hypocrites to the nth degree. A friend of mine had a vision about a golden egg, and he was taken up above America, and he saw this beautiful, glowing egg. And he thought, boy, that was the most beautiful sight, he said, I've ever seen. This egg was golden, and it was glowing, and it was just a gorgeous egg. Then he said, I saw cracks develop in it, and this awful ooze and stink came up out of it, and it's all this black ooze out of the cracks covered the country. And then a voice said, that might be America on the outside, but this is what America is on the inside. Deadly stuff. I just don't think people realize it. And I'm beginning to think, like you have suggested, and I agree with it 100%, that Trump is judgment. And this judgment is going to take a form that most people would not realize its actual judgment until it hits. What do you think?
Yeah, and also at the same time, there's warnings of not an Arab Spring, but I guess you could say a social media spring, spurring protesters into the streets, and I kind of tie that in with some reports coming out of Fox News that women's groups, et cetera, are going to begin to descend on Washington, D.C. again, and I guess wear their anatomically correct hats or whatever. But Cliff Hive recently, he's got a new one out. It says, first ever global government crash coming, warning of a crash of the ability of the state to function. America may finally, we can't even get an airline to function anymore hardly without social media running the rails. Social media has pretty well ruined this country. Everything's so politically correct except Trump, and he gets hammered every day. But could social media render America to lose its ability to function by government?
Well, they have these flash mobs that are showing up, and that's all done through social media, where they all get together. I guess they tweet or whatever you call that stuff, email one another, and they all say, okay, let's hit Macy's at 2 in the afternoon. and they get hundreds of these kids to go in and they'll hit a store. So we are totally lawless at this point. And you got people like Pelosi and Schumer and all those guys, they're lawless as well. So, yeah, I believe this American spring is coming. I think they're waiting for a little bit of weather maybe, but that's what's going to happen. And the spirit of Antichrist is rising all over the world. I mean, look at what happened over there in Egypt with the Coptic Christians. I mean, no rhyme or reason to it. Kill the Christians. Get rid of them. They're the problem, and we just need to get rid of them. And I think America is coming very, very close to that. All you got to look at is what they spend on Halloween and what they spend on Christmas.
I find it incredibly interesting that you can't mention the name of Jesus in your public schools or public buildings, but they're making people build worship centers in all of those areas so the Muslims can worship their God, but a Christian, he's just spit on and shamed.
Well, I think that's all part of the overall Illuminati plan to bring down America. I've often thought that they're going to use the Muslim world to do all their dirty work, and then they will turn on the Muslims as well. They're just using the Muslims. They use religion. Most of those guys are not religious at all. They just simply know that if they can manipulate people with their particular religions, they can get all the work done they want, and then at the end, boom, they'll just turn on them. But I don't know if it's going to actually work here in the United States or not. People are beginning to, catch on that there's something really wrong going on. And getting back to this NRA ad that's on TV now, that's about revolution, isn't it?
Yeah. Huh.
So it's the NRA attempting to stir something up? Or are they just warning them there's an American spring coming, get ready? What do you think?
I've seen Dana Loesch and a few other people recently really ramping up the rhetoric about have your gun and prepare to defend yourself and your family. So I would almost have to say the NRA knows what's coming, and they're warning their people or whoever will listen to get ready to take care of yourselves, because you and I both know that this social thing will stir up such trouble that the police will be busy with other matters.
Yeah, and do you really think when this trouble comes down, you were a police officer for years, are they going to go out and enforce all this stuff, or are they going to go home and protect their own families? In other words, there'd be a lot of no-shows in the sheriff departments, the police departments. I mean, it kind of happened out there in L.A. during those riots where the police officers wouldn't even go in to help anything. If you got stuck in it, you were totally on your own.
Well, one of the interesting things, Stuart, is I think that a lot of them would be concerned about their families, but you got to remember how the government has, the last number of years, infrastructure is not the people. In other words, even the FBI, the three-letter agencies and all of them, Homeland Security, their whole purpose is to protect the infrastructure. I emphasize that word, infrastructure of the United States. It is not the citizens. Now, if people can't figure out what that means, I feel sorry for them.
Yeah, I don't. Well, people, I think, like I heard Stan say something about he was helping, try to get the neighbors to prepare, and one of the neighbors said, "Why should I prepare? I'll just come and take what you got."
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think that's going to work too well, but they probably get a bullet. But anyway, switching over to Earth changes. What is this business with this new fault that's been discovered out west, and all of the reports that are coming out that they are way overdue for a huge earthquake out there? What's the deal there?
Yeah, that's very interesting. There in California, especially, they've had earthquakes. A lot of them in Nevada on the border, basically with California, but they're really concerned and warning mostly about a deep rift between Los Angeles and San Diego is what they're saying. And the Juan de Fuca also, it's a portion, I believe, close to that, that could go. But they're really warning about a big one out there that is way overdue, and they're muchly concerned. But at the same time, you're talking about the earthquakes out west. Dutch Sense, who follows, they hammer him all the time. He can't keep a website up 15 minutes, but he's been sending some warnings out recently, indicating that there's a lot of magma movement under California and the West Coast and up in that region, and that's what's going on. A lot of very shallow earthquakes, and I'm talking less than a mile deep. I mean, they're really shallow, which indicates, magma movement or underground volcanic activity. We're seeing that.
Well, Larry Parks, remember him? Before they shut him up and he went totally silent. Oh, yeah. He made mention of the fact that there was huge magma movement coming up under the Baja Peninsula, coming into California, and then it branched off, and it kept going up to the major volcanoes, but then it branched off to the Long Valley caldera, and part of it, I guess, is maybe part of Yellowstone. They don't even know. Is Yellowstone still having lots of problems? I mean, it went out of the news. It comes on, then it goes off. But I've heard reports that it's very unstable. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they've been reporting for some time heating of the ground under that region, and also you get quakes reported off and on. But remember, Stan and Holly Dale, they reported that the public seismograph readings and all of that were stopped. So nobody really knows a whole lot about that. They're not talking about Yellowstone anymore, basically.
Yeah, I know the bots also said that Antarctica was going to undergo some major earth changes down there. Earthquakes and volcanic activity, all kinds of things was going to start. And the only reason I bring that up is we have talked about Antarctica and the mystery of it for some time, and then all of a sudden it all went quiet. And we heard about the giants being let loose, and we heard about military going down there and trying to hunt them down, but we haven't heard a word. Have you heard anything? I haven't heard anything.
There were some reports on Quail's site and other places that they were trying to hire people to go to Antarctica to work, and nobody seemed to know what that was all about. But we do know that they have regular flights down there. We even saw a pilot, recently got to come home, but they're military people now, it seems, involved in all of that. So it's quieted down quite a bit. The sources have shut up.
Well, I know the bots mentioned secret technology, kind of like the golden mirror technology, and all kinds of stuff like that. Now, what's interesting is if you go into the book of Enoch in chapter, I think it's like 18 or 19, it talks about a place that Enoch was taken to by air, so that's probably UFO, or however they did it, a place down south where the sun never sets, with a 7-mountain chain where all of these entities are kept underground. So I went in and I looked at 2 Peter 2. For if God spared not the angels that sin and cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto the judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah and the 8th person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world to the ungodly. Now in the book of Enoch, it says the giants who have been born of spirit and of flesh shall be called upon earth evil spirits, and on earth shall be their habitation. Evil spirits shall proceed from their flesh, that is when God killed them, because they were created from above. From the holy watchers was their beginning and primary foundation. Evil spirits shall they be called upon earth, and the spirits of the wicked shall they be called. The habitation of the spirits of heaven shall be in heaven, but upon earth shall be the habitation of the terrestrial spirits who are born on earth. And then it said that the spirits of the giant shall be like clouds, which shall oppress, corrupt, fall, and contend and bruise upon the earth. And then it talks about the death of the giants and, where they perished, et cetera, et cetera. And now to the watchers, which we would call probably, I guess, fallen angels. It says, being numerous in appearance, made men profane, caused them to err, so that they sacrifice to devils as to gods. And they are taken down to this place that sounds very much like Antarctica, underneath the ice. And it said they were numerous in appearance, or they assumed many different forms to fool mankind. And I believe that's the evolution conspiracy. That's how that feeds into that. I think that's kind of interesting, because that's exactly what they said it happened. They got out.
Yeah, and what's very interesting too is Standeo's report about how that at one time Antarctica was literally up close to the Middle East, Saudi Arabia and India and that region, and then because of a cataclysm, it was pushed down and flash frozen yes, where it was, where it is now.
Yep. And lo and behold, this kind of stuff is coming up in the reports we're hearing anyway, the military reports, the bots and everything, of these giants getting loose. So that doesn't sound too good. Like, we've talked before, they're going to come back out. Red Oak said they were going to break through and come back out. Yeah. Anyway, anything else you got before we close down? We got about a minute.
Oh, I just tell people to be aware. Go ahead and do your Passover thing and holiday thing, but be aware, because we're going into a weekend that Saturday and Sunday and maybe into Monday, we need to be closely watching what's happening around the world around us, and just be aware. Yeah, be very aware. Deagle.com, and nobody knows who they are, where they get all this information, but it shows a map of a planned destruction of 90% of the world's population, and America specifically gets really hit hard. The 2024 forecast for the United States is we will be down to a population of 59 million. So anyway, folks, take care. Things are happening real fast. We'll see you again next week. Thanks for listening. Appreciate Larry being on. Good night now.